Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Florence Sumere. I'm the VP of Marketing Communications for ECI, and I'm excited to introduce our last session for today. We are the ECI Leading Edge series, applying ERM to ESG-related risks. And this session that's coming up is quantifying ESG risks to drive performance. And so I want to thank Compliance Line for sponsoring this particular session. We have Nick Gallo, he's the Chief Servant and Co-CEO of Compliance Line, as well as Giovanni Gallo. He is the Chief Development Officer and Co-Chief Executive of Compliance Line. And we have Bob Martineau, he's a Senior Partner with Finn Partners. Nick, Gio?
Hey, Florence, thanks for the intro. Glad to be here. Really excited to dive into this session where we're going to be talking about using ESG to drive performance. So we have a great panel today.
You've muted out,
Nick. We think we hit you mute there.
Including me. Please don't mute me. And also, if you're not speaking, please mute. We want this session to be a really tactical session. A lot of us have been hearing about ESG for the last couple of months, perhaps a couple of years. From the last conference that we were at, every single time it was brought up, it felt like there was some anxiety in the room. So what the point of this session is to really get tactical, to see, the question that kept coming up was like, where do we start? Where do we start? So we brought on Bob, who is an expert in many things. And Gio and I, we're going to dive into some great examples, and we're going to provide some tools for everybody to get started. So to dovetail off Florence, let me give a quick intro to Bob. Bob is the Senior Partner at Finn Partners. Bob, how would you describe yourself?
Thanks, Nick. I'm very pleased to be here. I've spent most of my career in the environmental policy and sustainability space, first as a lawyer and then as a regulator running a state environmental agency, also working at US EPA. So I've got the substantive background in networking and sustainability space.
Hey, Bob, hold on real quick. Hey, everybody, if you don't mind going on mute, that would be very helpful. We'll have some time to call on you later, but for the moment, please make sure you're muted. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah, that's my introduction, and I recently joined Finn Partners to work on the public affairs, government relations, and public relations side, working and leading in their sustainability practice in the Southeast.
Great, thanks for that, Bob. Gio, why don't you give us a little intro on and also why you're so passionate about this and what you're hoping to get out of today's session?
Yeah, so I'll try to cover all three of those. So, the intro is, Nick and I lead Compliance Line, and we do this because we care about people, and we think that companies and the workplace are a massive forum to impact the lives of people positively. And as I think a lot of people in the ethics and compliance profession, we see that this thing that we all call ethics, this thing that we're pushing forward of compliance programs and policies and training and speak up culture and all these different things are a way for us to serve our company's mission, build a great career, and ultimately have a positive impact on people's lives. So we do that at our company, Nick and I do, by building great teams that serve our clients well. And when we do our job well through our software and everything else that we do, we help millions of employees get taken care of by the heroes that are the compliance leaders at their organizations. And what I'm really excited about, why we talk about ESG is this is the coming of age moment, I feel like, for the ethics profession. We're out of the 90s. We're out of the keep the boss out of jail compliance 1.0. We're moving through kind of 2.0, get efficient. We're moving into, hey, let's actually be effective and make sure that ethics and compliance is for the entire organization. And ESG is this thing that has kind of come up on the side, right? Like this wasn't invented by compliance professionals. It's kind of come up organically from a bunch of different places. And this is a chance for the skills and the knowledge and the overview and the things that really make, our peers and the other people running compliance programs across the world really make them shine. These are the things that can be applied to ESG. And we're going to be talking today. This is what I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking today about hopefully we're going to give you a little bit of guidance. Hopefully we're going to give you some ideas of how to kind of get started or move forward here. But we're also going to be talking about, this is going to take a little bit of a different approach from, say, implementing a policy to match a regulation. This is a little bit more free form right now, but that is where the opportunity lies to step up, to be a leader in the organization, and to really have that impact that we're all driving for as we're trying to get authority and trying to get into strategic conversations and get budget. ESG is our path there, and that's what makes me really excited about it.
So we are going to dive in with the presentation, and we also have a tool for you that we're going to share the link in the chat right now. And we'll walk through this tool in a bit, but again, we want everyone to be able to walk out of here with some kind of a catalyst to move forward, something tangible that they can begin implementing within your organization, whether that is on a program that you're spearheading, or whether just to augment from an advisory perspective, or just to jump in and help. To Gio's point, this is a huge opportunity in our broad careers, and really the next 10 years of ethics and compliance is going to look a lot different than the last 10 years, but it's going to be on us to be that change and drive that change forward, not only to have more power and impact in our organization, but to really unlock the magic in our workforce that everyone is really thirsty for. So with that, let's jump into one of my favorite quotes from Robert Swan. So this quote says, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." And I think what's underpinning a lot of the ESG right now is the fact that we need to be the change that we want to see in the world. The new generations that are coming into our workforce, the millennials, the Gen Zers, they get a lot of credit for really caring about purpose and really caring about impact and so forth. But I think, and I can say this because I'm one of them, one of the good ones at least. We're just more vocal about it. People forever have cared that the impact that their work has on the world, is leaving the place better than they found it. And we now have an opportunity, because this is kind of top of mind for at the executive level, it's top of mind for investment funds, it's top of mind in sort of the broader conversation, to kind of move from the shareholder focus to the stakeholder focus that's a lot more comprehensive, that has a lot more dimensionality to it, and we can really use a lot of the powers that we have for good. What you're going to see today, if you've been feeling with respect to ESG, where do I start? Where do I start? There's, it's so amorphous, I don't really know how to get going. I think by the end of this conversation, you're going to see, okay, I'm a lot further down the road than I think. And there's a lot of things in place within our organization that we can pull data from to prove that the commitments that we have in place can be sort of aggregated to prove out, which is a lot of what ESG is about. It's about proving out or showing your receipts, proving out the impact that we're trying to have, and also starting to articulate what goals we have and the steps that we're taking to achieving those. So let's jump to the first slide here. So
I would just add to that, Nick, I think that quote is more expansive, right? It's a great quote. It's focused on the E in ESG. But I think that applies to a bunch of different things. The greatest threat to our compliance program is assuming that someone else is going to lead us to the board table.
That's right.
And the strategic level. And really, the greatest threat to our company's ethical actions is assuming that the regulators are the ones who have to tell us how to act ethically. That's a pretty low bar, what you're going to get thrown in jail for. There are a bunch of more things to do that are ethical and the right way to do it that the regulators haven't kind of gotten around to. How do I script this out for the entire economy? And I think that's a lot of our push here today is, hey, you can look at this as a threat if you don't do it, or an opportunity if you jump in and get involved. And this is a huge opportunity here.
Bob, before we dive into this slide, I'd like you to speak a little bit to what feels different about this ESG movement, as compared to other movements in the past, corporate social responsibility, other sort of sustainability pushes. As you look kind of over the next few years, and as you take yourself off mute, what feels different about the moment now?
I think a couple of things, Nick. You make a very good point. I think some of the stuff you alluded to, I think first, many of folks who have had compliance responsibilities in the past were looking to underlying regulatory or statutory, permit, or they had SEC rules to follow. They have IRS guidelines, so you can meet the letter of the law, and you're trying to be creative in doing that. But it's regulatory, it's rule driven, and I think this moves way beyond that. As you say, the day may come soon that there are going to be specific rules from the SEC or others, but right now there's still a lot more flexibility. There's lots of different guidance out there, which creates a little bit of chaos, but it also creates opportunity. And then I think you have the coming together in the last couple of years, particularly in the United States, of a refocus on climate change, the COVID pandemic and health issues, The E part of our life is back, and I think companies are really taking seriously that. The second, the social justice movement, the Black Lives Matter of the last 2 years has really focused people on the S, and companies revisiting their commitments to diversity and social justice, and really asking themselves, are we about more than just the profit line, bottom line? And then you have the governance and the transparency, and as you spoke, the younger folks in your workforce, your customers, your investors are now saying, we want to see something else other than how many dollars did you make in the last quarter in your shareholder report. So you've got the combination of these things coming together that has really given an unprecedented focus. Surveys have been done recently about young employees. 80% of them say they'll take less pay if they feel like they're working for a company who is socially responsible and is committed to diversity and represents the community they live in and is not harming the planet. Well, that's a pretty big, 2 generations ago was how much can you make, to provide for your family, and the paycheck was the important thing. And you really didn't ask a lot of questions about what the underlying business of your where your paycheck came from. That's not true anymore. So those are the things that bring a unique opportunity. Investors are asking these scorecards. Again, it's not just shareholder profits. In the last quarter, it's what is the company's commitment to the planet and to doing good. And the great irony is, it used to be you did the social responsibility things, sort of the feel good, that the Starbucks or the Ben and Jerry's ice cream that gave back as sort of a feel good thing, and it was considered at the loss of some profit. Now, if you look at the recent investors, the ESG driven funds are actually outperforming the market. So it's, even if it's a business purpose, focusing on these things is leading to better returns on your investment.
Yeah, people are going to vote with their dollars. They'll spend more for a socially conscious product. And, listen, we've had a kind of a half century on this Milton Friedman trickle out economics approach. And I think now in our knowledge work economy, now that a lot of those vestigial structures that are rooted in the Industrial Revolution, frankly, 150 years ago, as those begin to fade away, this new chapter that we're stepping into, again, creates this massive opportunity for ethics and compliance. Sidebar before we dive into this slide. As always, these are always best when they're conversational. So we have the chat box open. If you have questions, if you have input, please participate. As always, we're going to be giving out bonus points for your own personal balance sheet. So rack those points up and please participate. But, Gio, you kind of brought this point up when we were planning for this, that we have the opportunity as ethics and compliance to kind of write this story. Talk to us a little bit about how the Office of No can turn into the Office of No with a K and a W at the end, and how we can start to touch on these 4 pieces of this ESG puzzle.
Yeah, so I think that the no, knowledge no is a lot of times where people stop, at least broadly, and how they're looking at ESG. Of, you have to know what you're doing and report it, right? People have these great, slick presentations of, hey, here's all the things that we're doing. And what I think ethics and compliance professionals are going to be great at doing is taking that reporting and that public commitment and moving it into a continuous improvement, framework where we say, hey, you know what? Let's make these better. And we know how to do it. We know how to, persuade employees, how to get them involved in a program, how to track what we're doing and all of those things. And, the chance here is because, listen, I'm going to try not to overgeneralize this, but, there are a lot of people who have a perception that, compliance is just, going to keep me from doing something, and they never let me post on LinkedIn, or, I'm going to try not to ask them because I'd rather beg for forgiveness or whatever. Well, this ESG framework is something that your customers care about. So marketing and sales care about it, that your, vendors are going to care about it. So procurement and ops and manufacturing care about, investors care about, pick your stakeholders. There aren't just 3 of them, but, go through that. They all care about it. And this is a chance for us to raise our hands as E&C professionals and say, kind of based on some of the things we're going to be going over today, hey, I know someone has made a presentation for ESG. I know we've made a public commitment. This is not integrated across the organization. Why don't you give me the ball and I'll run with it? Hey, here's a plan. Here's what I'm going to work on over the next 3 months, and then I'll show this to you. Is this something that we can step forward on it? And this is the opportunity for ethics and compliance to kind of, if you feel like you're in a corner, or you feel like you only get a few minutes with the board every quarter or whatever it is, this is a chance to say, hey, everyone cares about this. Marketing should not be running your ESG program. Just procurement should not be running your ESG program. Just investor relations should not be running your ESG program. We think, in my heart, I think that the best person to make a positive impact on people's lives in the world through an ESG program is E&C professionals. And if we, can step up into that, and we're gonna stretch a little bit because you're stepping up. You're kind of giving yourself a promotion and saying, hey, let me take this on and let me figure out how to do this before the hammer of regulation comes down. I think if we do that, we can see the buy-in for compliance programs. We could see the respect that E&C professionals deserve start being offered to them, and we could see us having a bigger impact, whether that's team size or budget or just changing the way that the organization operates. I think that's the opportunity for ESG. Listen, I mean, I'll pause after this, but everyone else is asking the same questions that we are or that you are. Hey, what is this thing? What does it mean for me? Who's running this? How do we make sure it happens? I think we're, as E&C professionals, we're really well positioned to jump in and get it done. And if we can kind of step into, the discomfort of, hey, this isn't really structured and we have to kind of build this from scratch, I think we can take on that leadership role and have that positive impact.
Well, think back to those of you in the audience who have been in the ethics and compliance game for a while. Think back before this was an actual department in your company. A lot of the folks that I've talked to who have been in this game for a while, somebody viewed them as a smart person who cared, who was like, hey, figure out this regulation. Hey, figure this thing out. And in that amorphousness, they were able to be that translator from this sort of this regulation or whatever, and apply whatever was germane or applicable to their business, and start to form that that department. So that same thing that was the foundation for the existence of our function today is happening again, just on a new chapter. And there's a lot that we can pull from that. But it really starts with a mindset and a mentality around taking advantage of this opportunity. So why don't we jump to these possibilities? Bob, talk to us a little bit about how this different approach with fewer risks of failure can really lead to a bunch of possibilities that are actually endless.
Sure. I'll talk about the opportunities. And I noticed in the chat a question which ties in right there is, what kind of companies do you see the resistance to moving forward here? And I don't think it's a type of company, manufacturing versus industry services. I think the important message here is it's a culture, the leadership and the messaging and the commitment to the ESG principles and making a difference has to come from the top. If it's a check the box, or the employees and the customers don't feel like it's genuine, then it's not going to be as successful. But when the company wraps its mission around it and the C-suite leadership are behind it, that's how you can build effective ESG programs, because you'll get the commitment across the board, the funding resources and stuff. So it is about that cross-function department. I think you talked about it. It isn't this procurement does it. It isn't just environmental health and safety. It isn't just the HR department. It really is a coalition building across the entire enterprise. And then getting input and feedback from some of your key stakeholders is also important. And that can be your shareholders, investors, it is your customers, it's your own employees, other community stakeholders. If you operate in a local community, being part of that community, what matters to them. If you have a large operation in a community, you want to be a positive part of that community. So, and it may vary from community to community, what's important, and as you help prioritize. So it is that new type of leadership that's focused not just on profits per quarter, but on the overall mission and defining that mission and wrapping those ESG principles into that, building across the network. And I think a lot of people get concerned here about the opportunity. Well, maybe we're not so good right now. A lot of people are out ahead of us. it's all about continuous improvement. Everybody has to start where they start. Whether you're, in the HR department and looking to increase your diversity, your employee profile is your employee profile. So you take it where you are and say, how are we going to get better if we want to reach diversity and get more diverse representation in our upper level management, your board membership, whatever it is, it is where you are, and you just have to focus on continuous improvement. So that means you got to set the baseline and then figure out how to move forward.
But it's like climbing a mountain, Bob. I mean, how do you climb a mountain? It's just one step at a time. And I think by the end of this presentation, people are going to realize that they're a lot further up that mountain. They're in the foothills. They're not on the plains. They're a lot further up this mountain than they think. So that's a great question. And there's another great question that just popped up in the chat. How about funding of ESG initiatives E&C may come up with? You don't just tell your boss it's a good thing to do. I don't, just to play devil's advocate on that, I think you do. I think it's your job to do it. Who better than you to reframe? And I mean, our job is persuasion at the end of the day. If you're trying to get a workforce to adhere to an FCPA regulation, or you're trying to get people to speak up, you have to say some words or put them through some kind of a conversation to change those behaviors. That goes down across the organization, and it also should go up. And you know what? It's all persuasion is all about kind of empathy, which most folks that I talk to in ethics and compliance are kind of deeply wired with. And empathy is about being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So if what you're talking about is actually the right thing, and it actually does matter for the organization, and even if you're not in an idea meritocracy, which is what we all kind of strive to kind of work in, there's something in what we're talking about that you can use to kind of hit those heartstrings, so to speak, or hit those pocketbook strings, or whatever the boss cares about. It's just about framing it. And again, we're about to share a document with everybody that we encourage you to dive in. And once you start seeing what's out there on a lot of these ESG statements, you're going to start seeing that, man, I have a lot of this stuff already dialed in. I'm literally not starting from scratch. This is a lot more like us. We have a restaurant that serves dinner, us expanding to starting to serve lunch. We already have all the same things. We just have to be open for a couple of different hours. We don't have to build a whole new restaurant to start serving lunch. We have all those ingredients in our kitchen already. But just to, again, double click on that, it's not about us kind of telling the boss. I think we have to lead the charge. We have to be able to frame these things in a meaningful way to drive the change that we want. At least we have the tailwinds in the marketplace with respect to investors caring about this, younger generations caring about this, not only from an employee standpoint, but also from a purchasing standpoint, like in the actual marketplace. So it's pretty easy for us to lead the charge here, I think, and start to build coalitions within our organization to dovetail off of Bob's point. Focus on this continuous improvement, set goals, and start meaningfully moving towards those, again, in baby steps, and putting on a new leadership hat and really stepping out in a new level of confidence. All this groundwork we have laid in ethics and compliance over the last 15, 20 years is now time to bloom. It's time to burst through the surface and organically drive the change that we've been hoping for a long time. It's like, this is our opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll just add there, Nick, on the financial resources. I think a lot of the data is starting to show, and this is where you can convince those that may be skeptical, it may actually save you money.
Exactly.
If you're in HR and looking to increase your diversity and stuff because you have high employee turnover, et cetera, turnover is very expensive for companies. Lost time, training, transition, just the process of hiring folks, paying headhunter fees, all that. If you actually increase employee engagement and double the average tenure of your employees, you're going to save money in the long run. If you're looking on the E side and you're going
to save money immediately. You're going to save money
immediately.
We have gotten used to this dead weight loss. We've been riding our bike down the road with half flat tires because our employees aren't engaged, because our turnover rates are 15, 20% in certain industries. You can you change that 2%, you change that even 1%, that all falls to the bottom line immediately. To your point, Bob. And again, people are willing to vote with their feet now more so than they used to a couple of decades ago. Sorry to cut you off, but I get riled up about this opportunity. I mean, it's so big right now,
And the same thing on the east side. If you used to reduce your landfill waste, in half, you're not paying tipping fees to the waste hauler. If you install an LED lighting program at your facility and reduce your electricity consumption, the investment payback is in less than 18 months in most places now, based on electricity rates. So Spin-It, when I was at the state, we talked a lot about energy efficiency and saving cost of running buildings. We never said the word climate change because of political sensitivity. So, but we did it as a cost savings measure for operating state buildings. So, you will actually save money in many of these initiatives that will actually position you much better on your ESG metrics when you go to look at where you are compared to your peers.
Yeah.
So we've set
as
the
we move into
context.
this next slide, I just want to hit the subtitle here that moving into this is on that prior slide. Moving into this is going to give you fewer risks of failure because you basically have two options here. You can wait or you can take action. Right. The wait is wait for regulators. Wait for your boss to tell you, hey, I just figured out that this thing is cool. We should do it. Wait for HR to be your new boss because they take over all of ESG and then tell you everything what to do. So you can wait for something to get into this, or you can take action. There's maybe another option of you wait indefinitely and no one, people stop caring about ESG. But I think if we're here, we think that there's some momentum. So, we just want to encourage you stepping into this. Obviously, we're going to advocate to take action and not wait for someone to kind of tell you how to reconfigure your ethics and compliance program because it's now run, ESG is now run by investor relations. So we want to encourage everyone to jump in and get involved in it. It's not that hard to get started. And we want to encourage you, take a deep breath. You got this.
So we're dropping into the chat a doc that our team put together. Please check this thing out. We're going to walk through this in a second, and this is the perfect time to kind of start talking about it. So there are 3 tabs in this doc. Kate, do you want to jump over to that really quickly, please? Great point here, Claudia. She said it's a matter of integrating your compliance program into an ESG program. That's so spot on, Claudia. I'd love to pull you up here and just let you carry the rest of this forward because it seems like you really get this at a deep level. What I want to do, what our team has done here is they put 3 different tabs together. The first one is examples of a bunch of different ESG metrics from, we went through hundreds of ESG statements that are out there. And I think you're going to be very surprised if you haven't looked at a bunch of these, you're going to be very surprised at what people are putting in there. And a lot of these things you're going to have within your own systems, right? Let's just jump down to some of the governance ones. Your board of director composition, your board demographics. These are easy things to find. What is the composition of your workforce? What is your minority rate? What is your women in management rate? These are all things that you're already probably doing. HR is already probably doing. You're already doing. And these are contained in your HR system or maybe in your LMS system. How about this one? How about on line 124? How many code of ethics training completions did you do last year? You can very quickly calculate the hours of trainings. You can very quickly calculate your completion rates. I'm saying that a lot of the work that you're already doing in terms of trying to drive, the governance protocols within your organization forward are already contained in your LMS system. They're already contained in your case management system in terms of how many discrimination cases have you gotten in the last year? What's your days to close on that to prove your desire and drive to adjudicate those kinds of issues because you want to create and you want to be a bastion of an inclusive workplace. These are all things that like we already have going because very few of us who, especially folks who are coming to ECI and are members of ECI, they're not starting from scratch. Anybody that I've met from this organization, like I said earlier, is a smart person who cares, who's trying to drive change within their organization to make the world a better place. And a lot of this stuff is just about kind of wrangling it together. And like Gio was saying, building coalitions with other departments, knocking down some of those silo walls and getting creative about aggregating data together. You really want to elevate within your organization, bring a problem, bring a fire to your executives, and then also bring a bucket of water. Hey, this ESG thing everyone's talking about? Well, guess what? I have 7 or 8, I'm 70% there on a program, or I have 70%, I've aggregated a bunch of these goals across sustainability, across safety, across diversity and HR and our own governance initiatives where we can already start to sketch something out. And that's a great way to kind of get going.
Yeah, I think I'll add there that in these metrics we've put up here are just some samples from others. There are so many things out there. There's 17 UN development goals and with numerous subsets. various reporting, global reporting initiatives, SASB, all have metrics. But you need to look at your company and what matters to you. If you don't
Great
produce
point.
a lot of landfill waste, waste that goes to landfills, that's not going to be a metric that maybe is important to you and your customers or your employees. But so figure out the key metric things that matter to your company that can differentiate you, and then set this baseline and build a path forward to progress. You cannot do everything, and don't be intimidated by when you see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of metrics. You can start with a few core ones that are important to the company, and you can add others or subparts of that as you build your program. But you don't have to just get so intimidated because you see a spreadsheet with 175 different metrics and go, oh my gosh, where are we going to get this data?
Well, great transition. So the next tab in this document is a sample scorecard that you can get started with. You can pick a few of those metrics on the first tab and start filling them in, to Bob's point, with respect to what matters to you and your business. You can on this, so just sidebar, if you go up to file, you can click save, and you can save this down as an Excel spreadsheet or make a duplication of it, so you can use this as your own workbook and start playing around in it. But you can start to identify what the strategy is, what performance metrics correspond to a given objective, what type of targets we have, and start charting this out. So we'll dive into this a little bit more, but I just wanted to preview it and offer it up to folks so you can start kind of looking at it, so you can kind of cross-reference that as we get deeper into this presentation, and see what some other folks are doing. So why don't we hop back to the presentation? Folks can play around with that on their screen, or like I said, download it. But to Gio's point, I just wanted to prove to you that you do have this. You got this both in the sense of like you can do it, but also you got this in the sense that like you got a bunch of this data already, and you're already probably a little bit further than you think.
Yeah, and the idea as you look into this, listen, what I'd like to encourage everyone on here is a lot of what you're seeing right now in ESG, it's like social media, right? Everyone's posting, the only people posting something is people who have something to brag about, and they make it look really good. And you might think, oh, I can't do ESG because I don't have a 45-page report listing, 800 different metrics. That's not what you need to get started on an ESG program. You need to say, what do we have going on E? What do we have going on S? And what do we have going on G? G is governance. It's a bunch of the stuff we're doing in compliance. S is social. It's a bunch of the stuff we're doing for employees, discrimination training, and get some stats from HR. It's probably in your case management system already and stuff like that. And then the E, that's probably a little bit of an extension for us. But, put 2 or 3 metrics in each of those and say, hey, here's our starting point for ESG. Let's make these metrics better, and let's add some to the list every year or whatever it is. That's enough for you to get started on an ESG program. And the thing is, you don't have to compete with the company across the street or the biggest company in your industry on who's better at ESG. It's not a competition. This is the spirit that we engage with in compliance. Right. I see people all the time doing a roundtable, and their companies are competitors, but they say, hey, this is how we got a bunch of people to show up to training. Hey, here's what we did to improve our speak up culture, because we just want the world to be a better workplace. So you don't have to compete and compare. Just say, hey, you know what? Is anybody else in the company doing this in a fully integrated, running programs, reporting it, and figuring out the strategy going forward? No? Okay, fine. Here are my 3 slides with 2 stats on each. We're going to start here and move forward. It can start that basically and then move forward, because if you do that, then 5 years from now, when there's formal guidance from the SEC and the DOJ and all this stuff around this, you're already going to be there. But if you start now, you're going to be in a better place later.
Love it. I love this quote. I say this to my kids all the time. You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Again, you
say that to me sometimes, Nick.
We say it to each other. We say it to each other. So to Bob's point, let's hop to the next slide and talk about what matters most to your company. So Bob, how do you start to look at that and start to answer that question? And how do you start to spell out your goals, or at least start spelling out goals that you can start to suggest or sell to other stakeholders within the organization?
Right. I think there are a couple good things here that I think are important in identifying what matters. And I think that's doing what you call a materiality assessment. It's engaging. Don't just sit in the C-suite or in your little group of executives and talk about what matters to you. I think you need to reach to your key stakeholders. I mentioned earlier, your investors, your obviously the owners of the company, other investors, your customers, your employees. Your success of your company is going to be driven by how engaged and how hard your employees are willing to work, and they're your best or worst ambassadors when they go out into the community and they go to church or they go to the PTA meetings to talk about what your company is doing. You want them proud of it, and then those customers and also this, what's your view of your company in the community when you talk to a state or federal regulator, or the local chamber of commerce, or the local NGO citizens groups. How do they perceive your company and in terms of what they think you should be doing? I think getting some of that, and you'll get some great input, you'll get some not so great input, but I think reaching out and listening's always good. Sort of a good rule of business generally is to listen to others and learn from that. And then there'll be some things that are mandatory. If you're in the the auto manufacturing industry sector right now, your OEM, your customers are going to ask you for specific data on certain things. So, okay, that's going to matter to you because if you're a supplier to an OEM right now, they're going to ask you what your supply chain looks like and what your energy usage is and stuff, and what your diversity in your workforce is. So you better have those answers, or you're not going to be a vendor for them for much longer.
Yeah, and that's a great point.
Yeah.
Like just to interject there. The ECI folks just shared this in the private chat where there's some real genius being shared here. One thing that they see is among their members is the initiatives to look at their strategic goals, and they'll see areas of alignment. They likely already have buy-in from the board and leadership, given that it's part of the strategic plan. So again, it's about just kind of looking at this chessboard from a bit of a different angle to see some of these new connection points, because again, you're not starting from scratch. Most organizations already are trying to be green. They're already trying to drive diversity and inclusion and some of these things. It's just about kind of wrangling them together. Sorry to cut you off there, Bob.
No, that's all good. I'm done.
Okay. So I want to share something that came into the chat. Those of you who, this is from Claudia again. So a few steps that worked in her org when leading the ESG program implementation. So get your pens and your pencils out and take some notes. This is phenomenal. But first, gather information, designate gatekeepers, and ask them to compile what they are already doing for each of the components of E, S, and G, environmental, social, and governance. And you'll be amazed of the results. And then two, plan ahead. So how big do you want ESG to be taken in your organization? Start to plan your program and start to build the building around the scaffolding that already exists, right? Set action and key KPIs, and then just start to Gio and Bob's point, start engaging that continuous improvement methodology. How can we start taking little steps? How can we start identifying little changes in policies, procedures, actions, and activities within our organization that are going to drive the ball forward on each of these initiatives?
Yeah, I think those are key points. You gotta figure out where you are, and that Claudia is saying is setting that baseline is
right.
Getting that data. Everybody has sort of been doing certain things. The environmental folks have been worried about, in the environmental compliance group have been worried about, air emissions and hazardous waste emissions, et cetera. HR is worried about that. So let's pull those things together to set that baseline. And then the key data points will be, driven by what you want to measure or what others, if your investors are saying, we want to see a plan to get zero net carbon by X date, well, then you need to get your data and build a plan to get there to meet your investor demands.
So I want to try to help make this kind of bite-sized and actionable for everyone, because as I talk to ethics and compliance leaders, some people say, yeah, marketing or investor relations put out this report. I wasn't even asked about it. So what are we doing for ESG? And some people are saying, well, we're not doing anything and I don't want to get caught flat-footed and be responsible for this thing. I want to be honest that like some of these things that people set, carbon neutral by 2028 or whatever, they're kind of moonshoots. They're kind of like, hey, let's shoot for this and see if we can get there. And as ethics and compliance professionals, we're not used to setting goals that we're not sure if we can meet, right? There's a regulation, we better meet that regulation or someone's going to jail or we're getting a fine or whatever. But there's not a regulation here around this. So I want to just, I'd love to get your perspective, Bob and Nick, on how, reasonable or bite-sized can these goals be? It doesn't have to be, I spent 9 months studying exactly how many, weeks it's going to take us to get to carbon neutral. It can probably be a goal or two for each of the E, S, and G letters. And then just say, okay, well, those are our starting goals. We're going to refresh this every quarter, every year, but let's start getting this on people's radars. What do you guys think about how big or small these goals can be?
I think before we talk about like the size of the goal, I think we need to just talk about the credibility of the goal, right? Unless a goal, they say unless a goal is written down as just a wish, well, writing it down, again, assuming it's a SMART goal, which means that it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound, unless it's written down, it just feels like a wish. So it's less about what the destination of the goal is, it's more about writing that goal down and developing kind of a credible path of like actual, like auditable, so to speak, activities that can lead toward that goal. And then you can kind of give the goal a sniff test and say like, well, is that even reasonable or not? Like that's one of the major components. But what else would you add to that, Bob?
Well, I think a couple of things, and I think this is a place where the compliance folks in a company can play a really important role because it's walking that line here. I think you're right. I think this is a unique place. If you set a sales goal, and your performance is totally based on that, you want to meet it. But I think here some aspirational goals are okay as long as you set up you can't just say an aspirational goal to be zero net carbon by 2035, but then have no idea how to get there. So if you see an aspirational goal and you have a plan and your reporter in some other transparent way, you look at how you're going to get there. Folks recognize the world changes, things can happen, climate catastrophic events. But setting them too low, we're competitive. People want to succeed. So if you set them too low, though, and they're too easy to meet, people won't take it seriously. I had a company I worked with recently said, we set some initial goals and we achieved them like 4 years early. So we probably weren't aggressive enough. It's the old necessity is the mother of invention. If you set some really aspirational goals, and if you don't get quite there because something else happens, the world market changes, supply chain, whatever, that's okay. And I think here's the important thing for the compliance folks is you also, though, in this world of transparency, we have to look at the greenwashing. And you guys can be the check on that. The salespeople will promise a product's going to do anything and everything for everybody, and we've already seen, companies like Coke and stuff are being sued for their greenwashing. So it's one thing to say we have a goal to be zero net carbon by 2035. It's something different to say our product is eco-friendly or biodegradable if it's not, and so some of those words we probably used kind of loosely 10 15 years ago. Eco-friendly products, green products. Well, people are actually scrutinizing that. Well, what does that mean? And they're looking up the supply chain. So I think the compliance folks have a real role here to play to balance that feel-good report to be something that's not going to open up to you to some vulnerabilities on the greenwashing side, because who wants to be in litigation over whether they were too bold or misleading in those ESG reports?
Yeah, and regardless of what the goals are for your program or your company, if you're running this, and if if you at least have a seat at the table, then you can influence that and say, hey guys, let's maybe step it back a little bit until we have more assurance on that. And that's part of why we want to advocate for the smart, caring, responsible people in ethics and compliance to be at this table, hopefully, driving this bus.
Great point. So let's talk about workable metrics and how those tie to our goals. Gio, I know I showed some of those metrics before. Maybe that was a little bit early. I wanted to get that into people's hands, but let's talk a little bit about these existing systems and what we can start to draw from them, either, from a bottom-up perspective by getting into those systems, or just from a top-down sort of conceptual perspective of what kind of data is contained in these various systems throughout our organization.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, the earlier slide about, figure out where you're starting with, that's a fact-finding mission. And here your discretion and your leadership is starting to come to bear. And, to me, workable metrics and viable opportunities and reasonable goals is about understanding your constraints. So if you don't know what your constraints are and you have no idea what it would take to, reduce 8 tons of carbon over the next year, well, then you're not going to set that and you don't know what that is. And you're going to put that into kind of a category of, hey, we're going to track this and maybe do some effort and then see where it goes. But, you know, if on the other hand, you've been doing training around this and you have, you know, fewer incidents of discrimination being reported, you know, not because they're not being reported, but because you're training around it and, you know, helping to build that strong culture, then you can say, okay, cool. Well, let's step that forward. And if the HR team has been really working for a while on that social piece of getting better, you know, representation of women in, you know, middle and upper management, and you say, okay, well, we're on this trend, let's try to step that up a little bit. You can look at what you're doing and say, okay, let's keep this on this trend. Let's try to accelerate this a little bit. This other thing, we have no idea how to do this collectively as a company. So we're going to put this on, this is in a, you know, let's kind of workshop this for a quarter or a year and see where it goes. But ultimately you should figure out, okay, you know, start with what we said earlier. What are you doing? Where do you want to go? You probably want to be better on these metrics. And then how do you get there? I think, you know, what some people may not realize is this ESG can be split up into, you know, call it 20 metrics each. It can be 200 or whatever. And all of those can be impacted by, you know, 10 different things that you're doing, right? How you recruit, what your pipeline is, where you recruit, how you promote, and all, and, you know, and all of that stuff. So what the freedom here is, and, you know, some of this is obviously different from, I have a regulation and the SEC tells me to do this and I have to do this every month or whatever. The freedom is, okay, well, what do we have control of? What can we kind of see far enough forward on the road to kind of set a goal for? And let's do that. And let's start a new cycle of continuous improvement for our organization that's not just run by compliance, but it's run with, you know, in a coalition with HR and the execs and purchasing or whatever. And let's see if we can move this forward. But as you're picking viable metrics, just realize that, like, the metric that you pick, the way that you're trying to impact that, and this is the big one, the time for that metric, it, you know, gives you a bunch of freedom to say, okay, I don't know what I can do in 5 years. I'm gonna set a little baby goal for what I can do in 6 months, and let's see how that goes. Or, hey, I'm ready for a moonshot here, and I'm gonna say, you know, we're gonna get to this, you know, we're gonna have, you know, half the board be minority or women, you know, 5 years from now, because I know we can do it, or, you know, I believe that we can. You kind of start with where you are, you look at what progress you've gotten, and then you figure out how aggressive you want your goals to be based on, you know, the control and the buy-in and the budget and things like that. But also, this does not need to be a massive thing of goals that you start with right away. Just, you know, start with it, set some goals, start measuring them, and then add to that over time. And you're going to be able to be the leader that builds momentum into this program quarter after quarter, where people start seeing, okay, wasn't sure if you were serious, you delivered, let's kind of step a little bit closer to this and step forward on it.
You know, many of us have fallen into this sort of paint by numbers trap. Well, we've gotten very good at painting irrespective of whether we're painting by numbers or we're painting on a blank canvas. And ESG is that blank canvas that we can bring those skills that we've built as we've been coloring within those lines and really build out what is appropriate. We can be those we can be those leaders for our organization to translate all of this stuff, all of these acronyms and all these sort of related metrics and so forth into something that's meaningful and germane for our business. So you can control that reporting plan. You can control the cadence of those things. And you probably, being the circulatory system of the organization that naturally is touching all these different departments, you're probably you're probably in the best position to figure out who these key players in these different departments that overlap with these ESG as it relates to your business, who those folks are, and working with them, you know, again, to build those coalition and knock down those silo walls. So let's jump to the next slide here. I love this quote from Sydney Smith. It is the greatest of all mistakes to do nothing, because you can only do little. Do what you can. You know, this is again about taking those baby steps, being that change we want to see in the world by being that change we want to see within our own organization. And again, like I'm always telling everybody, who better than us? We've laid a lot of groundwork over the years, and it's now time for us to really actualize and really magnify our impact. Recognize that growth doesn't come in a linear fashion. It comes in a logarithmic fashion. And we're at this really exciting inflection point to really help take our organizations to the next level and really start releasing some of that magic in the workforce, as Bob was alluding to. Higher employee engagement, lower employee turnover, crowdsourcing risk management, and really actualizing all these all these human beings throughout our organization to help push us in the same direction.
Now, I think this message is important, and it fits, sort of what we talked about earlier, that, in a lot of the political debates over various environmental regulatory requirements and things over the years, everybody says, well, I'm only 1% of the problem. I'm only 1% of the problem. My change won't make a difference in this industry. This industry is only X percent of the U.S. climate, greenhouse gas emissions. So why pick on us? I think that leads to nobody taking responsibility.
Exactly.
Everybody. So you do have to start. And if you start establishing best practices, if you're a leader in your industry sector, whatever you're in, and you make a move to make progress, and then consumers, customers, investors, whoever sort of get behind that, employees want to work at that company, that incites other people to join in that market. You can be out front leading and pull competitors and others in related industries along with you if you're the leader there, and whether that's an environmental regulatory, environmental policy kind of goal of reducing your emissions, or a HR goal of increasing your diversity, or recruiting at historically Black colleges to, where you never recruited before, to try to grow your workforce, whatever it is. Other people, will follow if they see you're being successful. And as the investment world is showing, those people who are doing well in these areas are also doing well financially. It is not an either or choice anymore. I think the data has shown over the last decade or so that those groups that track well because of their ESG commitment tend to have better return on the investment. And right. Just as a fact, most investors now will score you on these things in some way, shape, or form, on however they score. And they're just going to they see it as a risk management thing. So if you're not dealing with climate change as a resilience risk management thing, that's a higher risk for an investor, for an insurance company to insure you. If you're in an area vulnerable to extreme weather events.
Great point.
Make a start, and it's going to pay off, I think, both from a return on your investment, but also it will actually start making change.
Yeah, so we got about 10 minutes left here. I want to get to one of these questions. Nick, pull out your wallet and get those bonus points ready, because we got a good one here. We have some other bonus slides after this that if we don't get to, everyone, they're in the slides. They're available on the portal, and also there was some loaded up to the chat. But, we've talked today about, figure out where you want to be involved, jump in, do some coalition building, take a little bit of a different approach to this. Get started and figure out what you have going, set your goals, see what matters to your company, all of those things. There's some work to do in each one of those things, but I want to encourage everyone that you don't have to do that work alone. There are consultants who can help you with this. There are examples online that you can do as Compliance Line. We just want to help ethics and compliance professionals be more successful at this. So we're trying to help by doing this and offering resources and things like that. You can get in touch with Bob and his team, but a great thing that I feel like is so underutilized in our entire profession is just getting in touch with your peers. Like hit someone else up on LinkedIn, pull out your business cards from that last conference you went in, remember conferences back in, the 2000 teens, and hit someone else up and, just talk through this. Because there's a lot of help that you can get from your peers. Someone else is asking the same question, is trying to figure it out now, or has already figured it out. I mean, this ESG topic is all over the place. So make sure that you're asking and talking to your friends about it. And it can be a nice way to just re-engage and say, hey, this isn't really like a burning fire for me, but I'm trying to figure it out. Let's have a chat about it. So as you think about that, I want to bring up this question. Thanks for jumping in. It says, how do you make sure metrics and quantification doesn't become the goal in itself and replace the actual efforts that are supposed to be made to achieve the metric? Is there a risk that we just kind of are posting numbers and we're not actually, making the world a better workplace, making the planet and, our employees and all our stakeholders better? What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I'd answer that with a question. How do you make sure your business doesn't just turn into an accounting function? Well, you don't. Your business is in the business of making money, or it's in the business of doing something because that something matters. So I think as long as we don't fall into that trap, as long as we can sort of make sure that we steer away from that trap and recognize that any sort of metrics gathering or whatever is by its nature a backward looking function. It's not going to be a leading indicator of anything, and keep that in its right kind of frame. And it'll allow us to focus on those inputs that actually matter, that these outputs are being measured, with these metrics by. What would you add to that, Bob?
Yeah, well, I think, and I think you're right. The metrics are only usually looking backwards. So, and I think this question highlights the differentiating between outputs and outcomes. We need to frame our goals as outcomes. We want a workforce that reflects the local community. Some with X percentage of representation. And you need certain outputs to do that. There's some tactics you will do to try to achieve that. You're going to recruit at more schools. You're going to develop an in-house training program to elevate up, rising stars that can come in and look for more diversity in that pool. If you focus solely on outputs, I went to 5 HR conferences, that doesn't necessarily get you. You need to look at the outcomes. And here, and especially in the world of environmental and the change, those outputs, or those tactics can do the outcomes. I mean, if you are reducing your energy consumption and usage of coal-fired electricity or just energy generally, that outcome will come, because you've contributed to a reduction so that there doesn't need to be a new power plant built. If you stop sending waste to a landfill or you use biodegradable products, if you're in the hospitality industry and you move away from things and use biodegradable plastics and recyclable materials, some of those outcomes will happen because you've developed a tactic to achieve that.
Yeah, so I would that's awesome, Bob. I mean, I think distinguishing these different, the different components of how you get to the destination is helpful. I would answer it in one word, and the way that you make sure that doesn't happen is leadership. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be a company, you want to go, Nick?
No. Go ahead. I think what you're going to say is smart.
Oh, well, let's hope so. If you want to be a company who's not greenwashing, if you want to be a company who's not embarrassing you and your other employees with these fake metrics, or, we say this thing is great, but, really, if you look into it, it's just because of where we're located or whatever. Well, then jump in here and pick the reins up here and, start moving this forward. It's not that hard to gain leadership of this ESG thing right now when it's nascent, when it's just, starting out, when there's not a lot of structure around it. So I think you do that by leadership. And, I think this is a Zig Ziglar thing that, your outlook determines your outputs, and your outputs determine your outcome. So you got to get the outlook right. Hey, how do we view ESG? You know what? Like, if you're worried about the metric, the metrics instead of the outcomes, well, you know what? That might happen if it's just run by investor relations. Nothing against investor relations. They're beautiful people. But if it's just run by them, then they're probably going to just be trying to get the thing that they're concerned about. And E&C professionals care about everybody, care about the whole company, care about the mission, not just marketing and sales growth, not just, perception to investors. Right. So if we step into this, at least get a seat at the table, help drive this forward, and you're going to be able to, help drive the outlook, right? What do we care about? Help drive the outputs. What are we doing to help get to the outcome that you want? And if you want that to be authentic, which I think a lot of us do, like E&C, ethics and compliance isn't full of a bunch of empty suits, a bunch of blowhards blowing hot air all the time. We're trying to get stuff done. And if you want that to happen, you got to jump in and at least take some part in, hey, let me be part of moving this forward and being part of the change I want to see in the company. How's that, Nick? Smart?
Super smart. I was going to say that was like way smarter than I was even hoping for. We're about to. Oh, go ahead, Bob. Sounds like
I was just going to follow that because I know we're closing down, but I think that back to the very beginning is you need the C-suite, you need the chief executive, you need the board bought on this, that it is a core part of the mission. If your executive compensation doesn't, we talk about ESG goals, but there's no measurement in how you reward somebody at the leadership, then it's going to be disingenuous if all they're compensated on is on profits and not meeting these ESG goals. They really have to be integrated into the core mission of the company, and that leadership has to start at the top, where your employees will figure that out, your customers will figure that out, and eventually your investors will figure that out.
Please download the slides. We have over a dozen examples of some great ESG statements that are out there where we've pulled out how different organizations have talked about their goals and how they've set those things and how they've outlined their governance structure and how they've tied to the UN initiatives and so forth. There's a lot of great commentary and a lot of great examples. Also in that spreadsheet, download that. The third tab has a list of a whole bunch of links to all these different ESG statements. So you can go and start to see what's out there. Be like Raphael from the, not the Ninja Turtles, but from the Renaissance. Be a creative borrower, steal things, steal ideas from other folks that are doing it and make it your own. One last comment from Claudia. I know I'm over time here, but please bear with me. This is worth the extra minute. Compliance officers are made to ensure companies' sustainability, ensuring a social license to operate S, ensuring no criminal activities are done in terms of the environment E, and ensuring an anti-corruption, well-designed and implemented program is the new way we should handle and ensure sustainability for all stakeholders. And this should be the best quote unquote excuse for compliance officers to take over ESG matters. Round of applause for that. I'm giving 10,000 bonus points for that comment. That's amazing. So thank you so much. Those spend anywhere. So you can spend those bonus points anywhere bonus points are taken. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you all for joining us. It was just a lot of fun. Hope you found some value in it. If you have questions or you have trouble downloading any of this stuff, please reach out to the ECI folks or to us directly, and we'll be happy to help in any way we can.
Yeah, please check out Bob. He's a seminal expert in this area, and his organization helps people get a handle around this. You can check out Bob on the Ethics Experts, our Compliance Line podcast. We got into ESG discussions and what's going on in this phase shift that's going on in the world. So check out Bob Martineau on the Ethics Experts. And, yes, ECI, Fin Partners, Compliance Line, and all of your peers and friends around the compliance community. We're all here to figure this thing out together. So let's do it together, and we're going to be stronger when we lean on each other and we help each other figure out these challenges.
Bye, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nick and Gio, for your energy that you bring to all of the webinars that you do with us. And Bob, I think what stands out for me is all the resources that you've posted in the chat and you're making available to this audience. And Bob, your experience and expertise, thank you so much for the contribution for today. And I want to thank all of our sponsors. First of all, Conversant by OneTrust, CAQ, FTI Consulting, Compliance Line, Vault Platform, and Navex Global. Thank you so much for today. Tomorrow